Welcome to the second live date of the Distinguished Innovator Lecture Series. We're truly fortunate to have today's speaker, Eshwar Belani. As today, he is Vice President of Product and Business Development at Rocket Fuel. Rocket Fuel just had their IPO on September 20th, if I've got the dates right. I think that is right. And he's been with the firm since the very early days. He's like employee number 5 or 6 or like on your hand counting type of thing. And he's also the founder of 2 other firms, Sensact and iLeverage, and that was acquired by Epiphany. He holds 6 patents and he's authored several publications. Equally impressive is that he's a graduate of UC Berkeley in computer science. He's also a graduate of another very excellent school, which is IIT, and this one in Madras. So with that, I'd like to welcome you. Thank you so much for speaking today.
Sure. Thanks for that kind introduction, Iklaq. So Iklaq and I connected maybe 5-6 months ago. Yeah. And at that time, Iklaq introduced me to this series, and he wanted me to talk about the trends, opportunities, and challenges in digital advertising, as well as share my thoughts and experiences in entrepreneurship, plus give you guys a full summary of my professional career. I think I need a few days, ideally, to do all of that, but we're going to try to cram it all in the next 50 minutes or so. And it's going to be a pretty fun and action-packed agenda today because we have a lot to cover. And since you guys are just about getting started with your careers in some sense, you're early on, it's worthwhile to take a long-term perspective of what you're going to be in for in the course during the course of your career. And hence I have the title slide here that talks about accelerating change and thinking of this era that you guys are going to be entering when you're going to be making these career decisions. So with that, this is what happened when I was in front of a group of Berkeley students the last time I was speaking to some of you. I was a teaching assistant in a computer science department at SODA, and this could have been due to 2 reasons. One is it could have been the material that I was covering that got this to happen, or it probably was me. At that time I was teaching symbolic programming. For those of you who are not familiar, in the world of computing, symbolic programming is a pretty fascinating area, which computer programs can certainly manipulate formulas, but this is about programs that can manipulate program components as data as well, and so they can adapt and change themselves. So clearly, that's a pretty fascinating topic. So it was probably me that caused this to happen. And so this time I bought insurance just to make sure, especially the folks on the back bench there, that it doesn't happen in today's talk. And with me, I want to introduce my colleague, Hank. Hank, maybe if you want to stand up. And Hank is in the recruiting department of Rocket Fuel. And I wasn't kidding when I said this is going to be fun and action-packed, because he has a lot of goodies that he's going to be awarding, quote unquote, throwing around. And so that's going to be the fun and action that you're going to have today. And we're going to try to keep this very lively and interactive. I'm really here for you guys. And try to give you some perspective from some of the things that I've learned. And I wish I had known all of this when I was in your shoes way back when I was in Berkeley. So let's switch gears and get into it. Think about the last 100 years, the 20th century. Let's keep it at the 20th century. Think about all the innovation that happened during the 20th century. Now, clearly a lot happened. I don't want to summarize everything here, but I've highlighted some of the key innovations that took part in the 20th century. And so my question to you is, given all of this happened in the 20th century, and if you think of some sort of an innovation score, you're going to take an aggregate of all the innovation and create a conceptual score in your head. If you compute the score, if you imagine what's going to happen in the 21st century, and you compute the innovation score for that, and you divide that with all the innovation in the 20th century, what would that ratio look like? You guys are smart engineering students. You can do math in your head. No real correct answers here. I'm just trying to get a sense of what that ratio would look like from your perspective. 10. Who said 10? Please raise your hand. Hank, give him something. He was brave enough to make a guess. Anyone else? There are T-shirts and sunglasses and notebooks and, yes. Approaching infinity. Hank?
What is the ratio that you're talking about?
The ratio, to rephrase my question, think of all the innovation that will happen in the 21st century, that is from, let's say, the year 2001 to 2100, and create a conceptual score for that innovation. And I want a ratio of that divided by, or that score divided by all the innovation that happened in the 20th century.
Okay. So the one that essentially that hasn't happened yet.
Yes, that hasn't happened yet.
Okay, all right.
Yes. 1,000. T-shirt. Anyone else? Yes. 50. Good guess. Notebook. All right, I'll take one more. Yes. 100. Your choice, Hank. Pick something. I don't know what you're doing with the inventory there. So we had quite a few guesses going from infinity to 10. I'm glad we didn't get 1. 1 would mean that you can see all this innovation here. Think about life in 1900 and think about life in 2000. That would mean we'd have about the same magnitude of change. So when you hear about 10, it means we'll have 10 times the change, right? We heard someone say 1,000. Now, who of you, which one of you knows this guy? Yes? Ray Kurzweil, T-shirt. Yes, he is Ray. And what Ray has come up with is this law of accelerating returns. It's a very interesting theory. And what that theory says is that the rate of progress in any evolutionary trend is exponential. I strongly recommend you guys go out, Google this, and read up his blog, read his books. He's published some fantastic books. He's got amazing theories on the futurist. He's an inventor. He's a best-selling author. He's a futurist. He's done a lot of stuff. And this law of accelerating returns says that the rate of innovation is going to be exponential, or the rate of progress rather. And innovation by itself, the rate of innovation is actually also doubling. So the rate of innovation, he claims, is doubling every decade. And so if you start, it's a compounded thing that you'll get to when you're computing all the innovation that's going to happen in the next 100 years. And one of the key remarks that he makes is that humans are very biased towards linear thinking. And one of the examples that he gave out, or that is commonly referred to, is the Genome Project. After about 6 or 7 years of work, 1% of the genome was sequenced. And if you're thinking linearly, you're going to say, oh, this is going to require at least a few hundred years before the whole thing gets sequenced. But since this was happening exponentially, in the next 6 or 7 years, so doubling every year, the entire genome got sequenced in a total of about 13 years. So it was 1% about 6 or 7 years into the process. In the next 6 or 7 years, the entire genome got sequenced. And then he predicted that compared to a more linear view of the world. So we want to keep that in mind. As you guys are entering your careers, you're in for this level of exponential change and growth. And don't just look back in the last 20 or 30 years and try to linearly extrapolate from there. It's going to require some really creative thinking. It's a really great time to be starting a career. So we're going to switch gears and get into an area that I'm deeply passionate about, digital advertising. Spent a fair bit of time in this area. And this is one of those segments of the market that is currently undergoing this level of exponential change. And we'll look into it why. Now, Iklak did ask me to talk about some of the trends, opportunities, and challenges in this area of digital advertising. I'm going to do a very quick run-through of the history of the last 10 years or so, and then we will use that as a stepping stone to get into trends. And this is going to be pretty quick. So more questions. Any of you want to guess how much time an average US adult spends in front of the TV on a daily basis? Average time? Yes? 3 hours. Good guess. Hour and a half. 5 hours? 5 hours. Good guess. Yes? 4? 4 hours. So I'm getting 3, 4, 5, 8 hours a day. Yes? Yes, it's true for some. Absolutely true for some. So Hank, maybe you want to distribute some of those. So these are the numbers that came out of eMarketer. And what you'll see here is TV is about 4 hours and 31 minutes on average per day, right? Now, some of you might be wondering where on earth do these people get that amount of time to see TV, but trust me, there are people who see more than that. So there are people who are seeing 5 hours, 6 hours of TV a day, close to 8 hours, someone with experience perhaps. That's like a full-time job, like it's like 40 hours a week seeing TV, right? But you've got all night, yes. I should remember I'm talking to the student crowd here. You're absolutely right, you have all-nighters. Now for the first time, what's very fascinating is that digital surpassed TV. If you look at digital, 5 hours and 16 minutes a day compared to 4 hours and 31 minutes for TV. And of course, there are other channels that matter as well. But this is a good place to start. When you're thinking about media and advertising, I'm not going to cover the nuts and bolts of what is advertising all about. A good place to start is channels and where people are spending time. Now, the next question for you guys is if you think about budget allocation, where are advertisers spending their money? I'm going to tell you that some channels are over-invested and some channels are under-invested as it relates to just the percentage of time that people spend on these channels. So a quick question to you guys is, who would guess maybe which channel is the most over-invested or which channel is the most under-invested?
TV is probably the most over-invested.
TV is most over-invested, okay.
Mobile is probably under-invested.
Mobile is under-invested. Any other opinions?
Print is over-invested.
Print is over-invested. Radio is under-invested. Let's see. So again, this came from eMarketer. So we had a number of different opinions. We had print is over-invested. So that is accurate. So 19% of all budget is spent in print, magazines and newspapers. But we spent today only 5% of our time with that media. We spoke about radio. Radio is about at par, 12 and 9%. TV gets a lot of money for sure, but people it's like a full-time job for some people to see TV, right? So it's on par with only in terms of, if you're thinking about time spent and budget allocated. The digital and mobile channels, yes, you're right. They are relatively under-invested. So that means that if you looked at the percentage of time being spent and the budgets being spent and just looked at those metrics, you can argue there's some catch-up to be done in these areas. Now, there's another interesting question, which is, should the budget be proportional to time spent? That's the bigger question. It comes down to the effectiveness of the channel. How effective is that channel? I may be spending a lot of time with that channel, but if it's going to be low or higher in terms of effectiveness, actually that's what's going to determine how these budgets get spent. You have a comment?
So the time may also not be equal to the number of eyeballs you can get. Like more people might be watching something for smaller time. You can have more.
But this chart is based on the average US person average across all channels. So that's somewhat accounted for. But this is a bigger and deeper discussion to be had, which is what should be the right mix of budget across channels. It's actually one of the open problems out there. Now, clearly, there are advertisers who are working in a certain way today and spending really hundreds of billions of dollars across these different channels and using all kinds of models and heuristics to make those decisions. But there are open questions on if they can do it better and how could they do it better. And this is an open area of innovation. It's an opportunity. So let's quickly go through the history lesson here. In terms of the evolution for advertising, we've gone through different, I would say, phases in the online world. It's very typical when there's a new medium or a channel that comes out, and online relatively, say 10, 15 years ago was new compared to, for example, TV, which has been around for decades, radio and print and so on and so forth. So the first thing you want to do is apply the the best practices that have worked in existing legacy channels to this new one. And so we went through this age of the delivery, which is really the mindset was along the lines of what people did in TV and in traditional broadcast. Try to reach a certain number of people, just want to reach them. Then there's a realization that you can actually start targeting people online, and you can build audience profiles and get to be more effective. So we're into the age of targeting, and this next age is about the age of optimization, as we get into more advanced ways of driving effectiveness for advertisers. So this is a quick summary for how traditional advertising gets done. A marketing person wakes up and says they want to hit a certain target audience. Let's say in this case it's women 25 to 34. Then they go out and they look at different TV shows. They look at different magazines. They look at different radio shows and so on, and they try to find where this audience, there's a higher proportion of these people. We call this over-indexing or under-indexing. Where does this audience over-index, where I can get more of them by just targeting a show? Clearly, you can see that the tools you get for targeting are pretty coarse, right? It's you either get the show or you don't get the show. And maybe I have a new pet food for cats, and I want to target women 18 to 34. And there's only 5% of the show that are women in that bucket. I have to buy the entire show and still show ads to everyone there. So that's a coarse-grained way of targeting. Clearly, a lot of the ads that you get, you deliver through this means they're basically wasted impressions, or you can think of some kind of a bonus or value add to the advertiser. They get the target, but they get a lot more. So that same philosophy was applied to digital in the age of delivery. And initial campaigns that came out, I don't know if some of you will remember, but way back we used to have dial-up. Does anyone remember dial-up? Maybe a few, quite a few. And so that time internet penetration was low, and people were just getting on the web. Today, of course, it's ubiquitous. But just getting to reach people was a big deal. And so the focus was on all of these different metrics that you see here. Then what happened was, as this became more sophisticated, people realized that I can identify users online through cookies, and I can start building profiles. I can start identifying some sort of patterns of what they tend to do. They go to sports sites, they go to news sites, or then to parenting, or whatever their interest and behavioral profiles are. I can start building these profiles. So you're seeing a fuzzy picture here, but as more data came into this ecosystem, this picture got a lot more clear. And today where we are is we have a lot of online data that's feeding this ecosystem. We have a lot of offline data that's feeding this ecosystem. So it comes down to purchases you might make in a grocery store, cars you may buy, other kinds of offline activities that you may engage with. All of that data is coming online to create what we call a very rich portrait of this user. And now you can do your targeting based on this. So you can say, I want green and eco-friendly moms in the West Coast with household incomes between 100,000 and 150,000, things of that nature. And so we've entered this age of targeting, where it was all about picking different segments of users that you want to target. So if you wanted women 18 to 34 with a cat in the household because you're selling pet food, you could get that. And that's what's been happening. Now, one of the issues with this paradigm of targeting is, suppose I hit a segment of women 25 to 54, and I just let loose all my ads there. And let's say I want some leads to come out of that segment. I have some coupons that I want people to download, and everyone who downloads a coupon becomes a lead for me. What will happen is, if I run the campaign just by targeting a single segment, I may get a certain number of leads, 80,000 leads for a $2 million campaign at $25 per lead. But if I dig in and I see this is a pretty big segment with tens of millions of users, and I see where these users come from, and I've just done a very simple geo setup here. So some of the users, just by different state, I've colored different states. So I have brown states and orange states that are doing quite well. They're converting actually very well for the campaign. The states in blue don't convert so well for the campaign. So instead of targeting the whole segment, This is coarse grain, segment level targeting, all of the women between 25 and 54. If I was to be a little smarter about only targeting the brown and orange states, I can get better effectiveness. So I would actually get 50% or higher than 50% improvement in my campaign results if I only selected women 25 to 54 in a certain set of states. So now I've basically taken that big segment and I've sliced and diced it based on one attribute called geography. Why stop at geography? Right? There are lots of attributes that you can slice and dice by, and what you'll soon realize is this becomes a combinatorial problem that really explodes because the number of segments that you have to deal with is not humanly tractable. So in this age of targeting, human segment picking can only take you so far, but the combinations, because every time I slice and dice, I get better performance, right? So I have to keep doing it. And then the combination of segments that I have to deal with is humanly intractable. And that's where we actually enter the age of optimization. So another disruption that has happened in our space is you've had to buy the entire TV show, you've had to buy this entire segment, you've had to buy course building blocks or segments, and there was a fixed price for the entire segment that you would buy. Now that has been disrupted, and now you can buy individual opportunities of users and context, and you can cherry pick the ones that you really care about. And you don't have to buy this whole opaque segment in some sense. And this is a really big deal that has given us this whole evolution into programmatic buying that's enabling the age of optimization. And so visually, the way to think about this is in the age of targeting, you would have segment level picking, and some of the people in the segments that you would pick would work for you, but there'll be a lot of waste. Remember, all the people who are not 18 to 34 with cats in the household, they're basically waste. And then you also miss all the people that are not part of the segments that you guessed might work, right? But in the age of optimization, what you can do is actually zoom into each individual, because you're not limited to buying these segments. You can actually go more fine-grained, and you can target them. The other thing that's happened is the context in which you target someone is really important. Think about the late 90s with dial-up. Really, penetration was low, and people would come on the web very sporadically. And today, we all have multiple devices, and the web and connectivity is ubiquitous. And so we entered this era of the connected consumer. It's not about reaching the consumer the first time you see them. Suppose there's a soccer mom who's in market for a minivan, and I'm just making this up. Let's say Nissan wants to show her an ad. Maybe she's in the Midwest, and it's 7:30 in the morning, and she's in a rush. She's on a good site. She's on weather.com, but she's in a rush. She wants to check the weather and drop her kids off to school. Her kids are screaming in the background. Showing her an ad in that context is not going to be the most effective way to influence her. But maybe when she's dropped her kids off to school and she's come back and she's taking a coffee break at, say, 9:30 or 10 in the morning, and she gets onto a parenting site, she's a little bit more relaxed in her mindset, and she's in market for a minivan, showing her an ad then will actually influence her and drive desire and get her to act. So the context in which you reach a person also starts to matter. So now if you add this complexity of getting to the right user and getting to them in the right context, that starts becoming a hard problem. And so that's what the age of optimization is all about. So as an industry, we are transitioning into this age. But all I'll say is there are some players who are there, and the others are in the process of making the transition. So that's a whirlwind history lesson of what's happened in the advertising space over the last 10 or 15 years. And now we're going to get into some of the trends and some of the open challenges and problems and opportunities and areas for innovation that we have. So I'm going to start with this first quote, which is a very famous one if you're in advertising, which is from John Wanamaker. And he said that half of my advertising budget is wasted. I just don't know which half, right? And as an industry, this is what the ecosystem looks like just for display advertising today. We are trying to solve that problem that he proposed over 100 years ago. And I'm not going to go through this. It's an eye chart. But there are many different ecosystems in digital advertising in the context of display. There's a separate chart for video, there's a separate chart for mobile, separate chart for social, connected TV is emerging. So there's a lot of action going on in this space. It's projected to be, all advertising is projected to become addressable, and eventually this will become a $500 billion space. So it's a mega massive one. And there's a fair bit of upheaval and disruption in the ecosystem right now, and that's being manifested in eye charts like this. So the first trend that's going to hit you is this convergence of online and offline. I have a son who's 4 years old, and he goes up to the TV and he wants that to behave like an iPad, where he can move things around. And they're wired today in a certain way to just believe everything is digital and easily accessible. And we will see this spreading. You guys have heard of all the cool new ways in which online is spreading with Google Glass and a few others. And this is, I put some of the more futuristic pictures in here just to emphasize that we're going to get media emerge in many places which you would not have expected, inside a swimming pool. And whenever media shows up there, what's going to happen is ads will follow. It's just inevitable. So this is the first trend, is a proliferation of channels. And as you get involved with new channels, there are media-related, ad-related opportunities with that channel. The next big open issue is about identity. And how do I know that I'm talking to the same person? Now that we have moved down to this user, it's not about segments, it's getting down to become addressable. How do I know I'm talking to that same user on an iPhone versus a tablet versus a desktop versus a connected TV versus Google Glass or whatever the channel may be, right? Stitching together a universal identity for the user across the ecosystem is a big and open problem. It's an area of innovation. Measurement, there's one space that has its issues with measurement. It's in advertising, as particularly digital advertising. I mean, think of the supply chains that we've had and how optimized they've become. And suppose you're in an automotive supply chain and someone sends you 1 million widgets, and on the other end you only receive 900,000 widgets, and you pay them for 900,000 widgets. Will life be okay? That's the world that we are with digital advertising. Is 10% discrepancy in numbers is well within reason. So that's for starters. But then we also always, not always, but we very commonly run into these issues where the media objectives that are defined for advertising campaigns may not be entirely related to the business goals behind those campaigns. We have issues with attribution, where only the last media ad placement in a majority of the cases today is given full credit for getting the customer to go ahead and do something. So if you're thinking about a big ticket purchase like a car, in many cases the way credit is given is what was the last ad the person saw before they decided to become a lead for this dealership. Now one ad probably didn't influence this person to make this whole big ticket decision, but that's how attribution is given today. And then there are a few more. There's the open areas for opportunity for innovation around getting actions that have happened offline and connecting them with media exposure online. If you think about most of the commerce that we have, over 90% of commerce happens offline. And if you think of online digital advertising as just being another channel for media that can influence actions offline, how do you correlate what ads somebody has seen online with their offline activity? So bridging that gap, it all falls into this bucket. It's a very big bucket, ripe with a lot of opportunity if you want to dive in. Planning is another huge area. Today, most large organizations are on these annual planning cycles where they make commitments 1 year ahead of what might work for them. So for example, they may decide to buy a TV show now for that's going to actually run next year, and they're going to make some basically guesses on what kind of impact that show is going to have in terms of their bottom lines. So we think that this will also change. It'll probably become a little more agile. It'll become a little more adaptive. And there's lots of money here that's being planned, literally hundreds of billions of dollars. Like I said, we went through some of the slides earlier with channel allocation and budget allocation. All of that is now happening today in a manner that is probably more suited for a more stable and steady media environment of the 1970s or 80s, but not in today's time-shifted, multi-screen, user-initiated, socially activated world. User journeys. So 100 years ago, we had someone, Elmo Lewis, who came up with this AIDA, awareness, interest, desire, and action framework. And that led to this notion of a funnel that everyone goes through these different stages. When they learn about a brand, they develop interest with the brand, and then they convert for the brand. But this is hopelessly broken in the current context. And again, there's room for innovation here. So for starters, the funnel probably looks something like this today. Because the linear one doesn't account for word of mouth, it doesn't account for customer profitability, it doesn't account for lifetime value. There are lots of defects in that 100-year-old funnel, but that's what we are stuck with today. And the real customer journey, and this is true, we have one of our employees at Rocket Fuel, she hadn't heard of, she's in market for a car and she was considering 2 brands, and then she heard somebody else whom she trusts actually went ahead and bought a Hyundai Sonata, and she didn't know of Hyundai. This was about 2 years ago as a brand, but just because somebody else bought it, it entered her consideration set. So it wasn't like a linear journey where she knew about Hyundai and knew about the Sonata, and then she tried to build favorability. It immediately got into a consideration set, and then she went back to learn more about that car. And it happens to us quite often today. You're in market for something, and you may vaguely know 1 or 2 different brands that you might be interested in, but as you do more research online, it's called this pregnant funnel. You actually, your consideration set widens as you do some research and then narrows down. So there are all kinds of different journeys that are going on, and these journeys, why should they be acquisition focused? There's a whole journey beyond the acquisition. In most of the companies, if you're in retail or in consumer packaged goods or quick service restaurants, there is a life cycle that's associated with that user. And media today is not necessarily being run with this in mind. They're still trying to fit you into this linear funnel. What's the point of building awareness if I already go to Domino's or Pizza Hut or wherever I'm going for my pizza, right? So you have to think a little differently about what it takes to move people who are in a certain lifetime value state to a higher lifetime value state with relevant messaging. So that's an opportunity. How many of you are aware of steady, good relationships where only one person does all the talking, in this case, yelling? How long does that last? It probably doesn't last very long, right? There's something you guys can resonate with. And so this has to move from one-way direction of messaging to more of a conversation where I need to listen to what you have to say and then react in an appropriate way. So that not much of that is happening today. And the next trend here is about storytelling. We have a long way to go as it relates to storytelling, coming up with high-impact creative units in digital. I've covered a lot of ground here, but I'm going broad and going pretty wide. And those of you, if any of this is of interest, you can go deeper into any one of these pockets. But there's a lot of work to be done on this aspect and emotionally connecting with users. There's one line of thought which says that users will eventually, pick ads like they pick content, and this whole interruptive marketing and all of that, will phase away. So that's a little more extreme, but that's where things are headed. And you can see that with Google's skippable video ads. Those of you on YouTube, you can skip ads within 5 seconds if you don't like them. You don't have to watch them. So that's where we are. User opt-in for ads. I'm not going to describe this slide, but this relates to, lack of a better word, the mess that we are in terms of the inefficiencies. You saw that eye chart with all those different companies and so on and so forth. So today, as media is executed online, one of the big issues is the amount of effort and friction and overhead that goes into planning and executing a buy. There's a lot of inefficiencies in that process. This is a white paper that recently came out from Boston Consulting Group, and they describe, says about 25 or more different inefficiencies that can be fixed or should be fixed in this process. So there's more areas to innovate. So that was a very quick, rapid-fire overview of what's going on in our world of advertising. It's a very vibrant one. The ecosystem is in a state of flux and is evolving. There's a lot of disruption, a lot of value creation opportunities. And so all of that should make it very exciting if you think of it from an entrepreneurial perspective, which is a good segue to my next section. There are two parts to this. I'm going to cover some concepts that by no means are less important, but they're very important, but there's a lot of awareness around them, so I've put them in an Entrepreneurship 101 section, and there's a 201, which are a bunch of concepts that are a little more non-intuitive. They won't come to you directly, but through lots of years of experience, you'll probably register with them. So the first question I always have is for entrepreneurs is you should be very clear about why you want to start a company. Don't take this lightly. It will come back. And I may tell you a lot of stuff today. And when I was in your shoes, I also heard a lot of stuff, but lots of it didn't register right away. But it's worthwhile to at least hear it the first time, because with experience, it'll start registering. So you want to, and it's nothing wrong in making money. So that's a very noble cause. You can say, I want to make money, or you want to become famous, or you want to have an impact on the world, or whatever your reason is. But please be clear about it with yourself. Many people don't take the time to even think about this. It's not about the idea. There's a perception that I'm going to get this cool idea, and that's going to be my ticket to success and glory. It doesn't work that way. There are hundreds of ideas around, and even if you have a cool idea that's, no matter how unique it is, within 3 months of you being in the market, there'll be somebody who's going to be copying that idea. So it's not about the idea. There's a lot more that goes into it. Building a rockstar team, right? This has been spoken about quite a bit. I know you guys know, but there's a lot of nuance here. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but getting a set of folks who are aligned, committed, have the same value system, these are all things that matter. And if you overlook some of these things, things may be fine for 6 months to a year, but then fissures will open up a little later. So you have to be careful about this. And what I find more with tech folks is sometimes you start with a cool technology that's trying to find a business problem. So you want to be clear about whether you're solving a real problem or whether you have a technology solution for something that you have to find, right? So you want to be very clear. Now, I'd advocate, if you had a choice, to start with the business problem and trying to find a solution to that problem versus getting excited by cool technology that you're then trying to retrofit into some business problem. So on the 201 section, in this section, you've all heard this, right? Follow your passion. It's a really good thing. Passion does drive a whole amount of new energy, determination, gives you high resistance against rejection, and so on and so forth. There are a lot of good things that come from passion. What I want to warn you guys against is becoming so passionate that you start building a bias and you lose objectivity and you start becoming obstinate and you build some kind of confirmation bias about how the world should be, and that's the only way it is. Because if that happens, then as you're waking up to how the world really is, you would have lost, you'd have paid quite a bit in terms of time or energy or money before you make that realization. And one good framework to think about that is, the x-axis here is just time, and we're starting at today, and this y-axis is the state of the world. So as you go down your entrepreneurial journey, you're going to have lots of people who are going to tell you lots of things. You can't really go with where the wind is blowing. You can't do this because he said this, and you really can't do this because she said it. You can't keep changing and shifting. You really do need to have a vision of where things are going and some belief that it's going to get there. But then, like I just said, you don't want to be obstinate about what is really happening either. So you have a vision for where things are going to be, right? So you want to be clear about that, and you want to believe in it. And you may have a whole host of other folks. I'm just going to collectively say, they may differ from you in terms of where things are going to be or how you should do things and so on and so forth. What you need to really pay careful attention to is how is reality really changing at any one point of time, and what does this trajectory look like in terms of, is it tending to go more my way, or is it tending to go more where with what others are saying? So you have to really have your finger on the pulse and be data driven about where things are going, and it's a trade-off between having the right level of belief, vision, passion, and also making the right pragmatic and practical decisions based on how things are working. So it's a balance between the two. It's not about just ignoring what everyone else says. This is really important. It's very hard to get right. Anyone who's out there can always do better than where they are, but this is important. And so recently I ran into this article by Scott Adams, who's the creator of Dilbert, and it was all about passion and how you need to be careful about excessively being obstinate about a passion, because the punchline was that if you're doing something and you're doing it well and you're successful, it will build passion more than passion by itself driving success. So look it up. It's on Wall Street Journal. It's a worthwhile thing to read. Now, as you embark on this journey, there are definitely going to be several days, and you'll be lucky not to have these. And I call these where you get into moments of doubts, where you start questioning whether what you're doing and whether this makes any sense, and you'll feel really low. There's going to be highs and lows, and what you really need to build a temperament for is trying to keep things as steady as possible, as stable as possible, and just so keeping calm, and it's more about grit and perseverance and hustle, and getting things done versus anything else, and that's what's going to get you out of those phases. So having the belief, staying on top of reality, and just executing through those phases is what's going to get you out. That really differentiates some of the more successful folks from others, because by and large we kind of have the same levels of ability and IQ and so on and so forth, but how you react during these down moments is what really differentiates entrepreneurs. Another good practice is this notion of building an MVP, a minimum viable product. So definitely go read up The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. It's an outstanding book, really full of best practices on agile techniques for entrepreneurship. Very, very relevant. So go look this up. He has things like deploying first and coding later if you're doing something in software, smoke tests, and so on and so forth. A lovely set of things you can leverage. As you're building a company, you'll also run into these build versus buy decisions. And what you want to really be focused is on your value proposition and getting to market quickly. So based on if something is your core competency or not, in general, you want to see what can get you to market quickly. Sometimes it's okay to buy and not build everything, so you get valuable time to market. You learn, because startups and innovation is all about velocity of innovation. And so the quicker you can learn what the market needs, that's where you will actually build more value. And so buying things that are available off the shelf is actually a good strategy on many occasions. And then my last point here is you really can't time markets. There's a role that luck plays, and you may have the best solution or technology, but it may turn out the ecosystem is not ready, or the customers are not ready to spend, or for whatever reason, you just have to be, you just have to keep trying, and there is the history is littered with examples of companies that were too early for the market, and the window opened much later. So you want to be aware if that's the scenario you're running into, and what you can do in the interim. So I'm going to quickly go through my journey. Iklak asked me to walk through what I did, and I started off at Cal. I was a student here at SODA. I did my master's, and after that I went to Oracle, a company you guys are very familiar with. I spent some time there, and then in the late 90s, I connected with some of my IIT friends, and we started this company called iLeverage. It's a very interesting concept back then, which e-commerce was really emerging, and it was quote unquote very hot. So our idea was to own the exit corridor, and as people completed purchasing items with one e-commerce vendor, we were trying to introduce those users to other related e-commerce vendors. An example would be you went to Home Depot and you got a book on home improvement, right? Oh, sorry, you went to Barnes & Noble and you got a book on home improvement, and you're going to do something in that area, so that makes you a really good candidate for Home Depot to acquire at that point in time. So we were trying to build this network of e-commerce vendors who would collaborate with each other, all dynamic based on user transactions. So that was a fun experience. We got acquired by a public company back then called Epiphany, which was a leader in marketing and marketing automation systems. And I went to Epiphany for a while. I learned a lot at Epiphany. We had about 35 of the Fortune 100 were my clients at Epiphany for the marketing automation products that I was driving, and I learned a lot about marketing by hanging out with those folks, the directors of marketing and senior people in marketing at Fortune 100 type companies. So I really learned a lot there. Then went off on the side and did another company. This was in the Internet of Things, very fun technology play. And we had some good early success in terms of deploying building automation systems and so on and so forth. And then that got taken over by a company called Signet Wireless and moved the operations to Asia, because in this space we were getting a lot more traction in Asia, and I didn't want to move to Asia at that point in time. So we got it acquired by Signet. And then I joined Rocket Fuel, as Clark was saying, in the early days. I have been there since. It's been quite a ride to get in from really at the ground floor with no products, no revenue. And this was back in 2008 when the company started. So the markets, you guys remember the economic recession and the times we were going through. And that was the context in which Rocket Fuel started. The world looks very different today. We are about 550 or 600 people right now. Just went recently public and growing pretty rapidly. So that's been the journey so far. And in closing, I want to highlight that as you guys think about going down your own journeys, there's a role that it's a gamble that you're going to take, and luck does play an important role here, but luck favors the prepared mind. So, jump in, the water is fine.
All right, great. So thank you. First of all, it was really great to get your industry overview and teach us kind of the lessons of how advertising has evolved in the industry, and to give us the lessons, the entrepreneurial lessons as well. Why don't we take a couple questions, and then I think we're going to head towards the hour. Yep.
I have a question.
Yes.
You said it's not always about the cool idea and about the other things. Like, can you elaborate on the other things? Because I think the idea is the one which attracts everybody to a team, basically.
Just repeat the question.
Sure. So the question was, why is it not just about the idea? Because the idea does attract folks to the team.
Not just folks,
investors and so on and so forth. So it can't be only about the idea. And just because you have the idea doesn't mean you're going to be successful. And you will find as you go down this path that ideas by themselves and visions by themselves are probably not going to get you very far. It is the team you've assembled and how you execute towards the idea and the value you can actually drive in the marketplace, and why you and your team are going to win in this marketplace. That's going to be part of the equation that will matter more than just having the idea. Now, relating to the idea, there are definitely many aspects. There's a concept of how big is this idea? How large is this marketplace, right? If it's very, very small, you're not going to get a lot of investor enthusiasm. Also, something that I've learned over time, the hard way, is how urgent is this problem that you're trying to solve. It's not enough for the problem to be a big one and have a big market. If it's not urgent, then you still have a problem. And it's not really ready for a startup. maybe a bigger company can attack that space, but startups need cash flow soon. So there are aspects of the idea that really matter, but it's not only about the idea. And don't get into this mindset that if I have this cool idea, it'll all work out. That's like less than 1% of the work that you'll have to do. Less than 1. Yes.
So in 2008, all kinds of money was parked on the sidelines. Did you decide to do VC or did you do private funding? And then did that help you? Looking back at that decision, did you make the right one? How did it help you?
Sure. So we were fortunate that we very quickly raised a Series A round of financing, I would say in the first half of 2008. This was before the big crash. The outlook was negative even at the start of the year, but then it became real towards the end. This is all public information, so Rocket Fuel raised about $7 million for their Series A financing, which closed very quickly.
And that was private funding?
That was a VC, yes. More David Dow. Bill Erickson at More David Dow funded the company.
How much did you raise total?
Good question. The question was how much money did we raise in total? In the IPO, we raised about 116 million. Prior to the IPO, it was, I think, about 75 million.
75.
I think, but all these numbers are now public. Yeah. But it's in that ballpark.
Okay, there's one back here.
Hi, I have a question about digital advertising. You started a lecture with that. So digital makes it easier to target and to identify particular customer, right? But it also makes it easier for customer to kind of skip advertising the way you give us example of Google advertising, that they can just click and close. So it feels that there need to be a different form of different form of delivering message. And so how actually should form of advertising change for message to be effectively delivered through this new digital channel? And also, do you feel that currently marketing is actually ready for this digital channel? They do have those new forms that advertising may be more hidden or less identifiable, so that customer cannot get over it. Thank you.
That's a loaded set of questions there. One of the big challenges that advertisers face is being able to show, this is a classic cliche thing, the right message to the right user at the right time, right? And that's a hard problem to solve. And so what tends to happen then is you tend to show messages to people, and in your example, folks may not pay attention to it. We've heard of banner blindness, for example, right? You just ignore the banner ads. So that is a big problem. And so what I would translate that into is it's also an opportunity because advertisers have to get their messages out to users. Right? If Nissan wants to sell minivans, then there are a bunch of soccer moms and others who are in market for a minivan. How does Nissan get to them? Because that is a problem Nissan really faces, and they are really keen with a lot of money. They're ready to spend a lot of money to solve that problem. So it becomes an opportunity for innovation. That's one problem that Rocket Fuel is trying to address and drive really high value and high impact for advertisers by doing that very effectively using very sophisticated technology. Now, there was a related part to your question, which is how does advertising become a little more seamless? And maybe there are new formats. And so I actually call that out as a trend. There is definitely an area of innovation and a lot of potential here to come up with new ways of storytelling. You saw there in the picture I had was the content was basically hugging the reader, right? And so the reader doesn't even realize they're being advertised to. And so if you see some of these recent developments in Facebook, for example, there are ad units which are called native ad units. All of you have Facebook accounts. In your news feed, you will see some units now that will show up from time to time that are not from your network of friends, but from advertisers. So there people are trying. Twitter has similar units. People are trying to make advertising as seamless as possible and also improve targeting. So at the end of the day, the user experience is better, and users are also getting value, from what they are seeing. But, that's the general trend. What I would suggest is there are opportunities for innovation. Some people are trying lots of different things, but there are other opportunities of innovation here too. Yes.
This person's been waiting
Oh.
Sorry, I just started the queue.
Oh, no sweat. Yeah, you guys should coordinate because.
Sorry. Go ahead.
All right, so I have two questions. The first is, you say you were passionate about digital advertising, and what are like the characteristics that made you passionate about it? And the second one is, do you think that ad blockers might be a big threat to digital advertising?
So what makes this?
Can I ask you all hold on just 1 second? Can you all wait just a few minutes and we'll have 2 more questions and that's it, please?
So what makes this a really exciting area today is this is a pretty large market opportunity. We spoke about the law of accelerating returns and accelerating change. For decades, think of the 70s, 80s, advertising has been largely, steady. You've had TV, radio, blah, 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 right? But in what we're going through now is some massive disruption with digital emerging at the forefront. But what's happening is the traditional channels too are becoming addressable, which means that I can now pinpoint for the same TV show, this will happen, some of it is happening today, but it will happen more, is I can show different ads to different households. For the same TV show, I can pinpoint based on set-top box or connected TV, smart TV, things of that nature, right? So all of advertising, with radio, we have digital radio. Print is becoming more in your iPad. Magazines are coming up in digital formats. So most of advertising is going to morph into becoming addressable. And it means that all that we discussed today in terms of the age of optimization and so on, is all those methodologies and practices apply to all of advertising, which is globally about a $500 billion space. So this is a big market that is ripe for disruption and innovation. And that should really cause a lot of excitement amongst folks who are new entrepreneurs, for example, who want to create value in spaces that are undergoing lots of disruption and change. So that makes it exciting. And it also at Rocket Fuel, we have a set of people that are extraordinarily smart, very, very smart set of folks, very, very committed. And that makes it a lot of fun too, to work with that group. And so all of these different dimensions add to the passion for the space and what you do every day.
Hey, Eshwar, what I think we should do is basically let's have the people who have questions now come down and see you, and that'll give us a chance for everybody else to appreciate and clap and so forth. And that way, if you got to go, that's just a small hint. Okay. No, but for those people who have to go, we'll give you a chance to go. And for all those that have questions, which I know there are a number here, just come on down. Okay.
Sure.